I guess sometimes 20 minutes is all you really need. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken, for the second time this season, in a game where I streamed it, they won, but in a somewhat exciting, though stressful comeback fashion against a team in the Central Division that it felt like they should probably beat. That having been said, though, with this game that they win 3-2 over the Chicago Blackhawks in regulation, so it doesn't even require a last-second tying goal and then winning it in overtime. They do win this one in the final minutes of regulation, but they still found a way to make it happen. This is a Blackhawks team that, while coming into the season, I still expected to be one of the bottom-feeding teams. They were kind of a disaster last season, aside from Bedard, who even in his own right had a step back from his Calder-winning season. They are a good team. They came into, I mean, who knows how the season's going to turn out for them, but they came into this game having played the same number of games, but with one more point in the standings than the Kraken. They came in with one more win than the Kraken had. They already had 10. Now the Kraken, with this win, get to double digits with their 10th win of the season. So it certainly wasn't a pushover team, and they were playing pretty well. I think they were 6-2-2 in their last 10 games coming into this one. So certainly not a pushover by any stretch of the imagination. Definitely not the easy 2 points that we've been used to the Blackhawks being, even for not always the best Kraken teams, but they still found a way to make it happen against also one of the hottest goaltenders in the NHL and mount a multi-goal comeback in the third, which is one of those things that makes this team kind of strange, right? It's hard to really figure out who this Kraken team is because they almost seem like a mix of the last two, I say eras of Kraken, but really even just last two seasons of Kraken, where you got the Hackstall Kraken, who were a defensively minded team and might not give up a whole lot of chances, but they're certainly not going to get a whole lot of chances offensively. And you could pretty much count out, if they were down multiple goals going into a third period, that game was over. Maybe they're going to score one at a point where they're down 2-0 going into a third. With the Hackstall Kraken, you were pretty much just hoping they could break up the shutout so you'd have at least one goal to cheer for. But even if they came back and tied it, they were going to give up a goal somewhere along the way. They just weren't going to win from multiple goals down. In fact, they won 0 games from multiple goals down in Hackstall's last season as the Kraken head coach. And then you had last year's Kraken, the Dan Bilesma Kraken, that may not have been very good defensively. They took a massive step back there. They would definitely let up a lot of chances, and even if Decord was standing on his head, he'd probably still let in 3 because of the crazy number of chances that the Kraken would give up defensively. But they were exciting. They could be down 2 goals with 5 minutes left, and they were still very much in the game. They had the most multi-goal comebacks in the NHL, and now all of a sudden you have this Kraken team who's defensively minded. They're getting even fewer shots on goal somehow than any season of the Hackstall Kraken. They set the franchise record at one point this season for the fewest shots on goal in a single game by 4, which is saying quite a lot, and have had a number of games where they're right around that previous low of 17, so they just don't generate a lot of offense, except for when they need to. They've had, I don't know if it's more than 2, maybe 3 of their wins are multi-goal comeback wins. I think it's just 2, but they've had a lot of these games where even when they're down a goal late, or 2 goals going into a third period, or 3 goals going into a third period in one case, it doesn't feel like they're out of it. Just like last year's Kraken, it doesn't feel like you're going into a third period down multiple goals, and that's, just better luck next time. The Kraken are losing these 2 points in the standings. It feels like there's a chance. And that was very much the case in this one. And of course, we'll get into just how that happens here in a second. But first, the changes in the Kraken lineup, which was just the one change. Still no Jared McCann. He is, again, with the team, and it sounds like practicing and skating. So I assume that they're hoping he'll be back at some point during this road trip, which is now just the 2 games over the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. I don't know if they're really going to ask McCann to come back and immediately play a back-to-back, but maybe he can be back for the game on the island against the Islanders on Sunday. I guess we'll find out. The Kraken could certainly use the extra scoring, though they still managed to make it work in this one against a at least plucky Blackhawks team, a team that they've given up some chances against. But Spencer Knight has made sure that enough of them stay out of the net with what is, to this point, maybe the best goaltender in the NHL to this point in the season in Spencer Knight. Crazy start to the season that he's had. Regardless of all that, the Kraken, we'll get to that, but the Kraken come in with just the one change in the lineup. That is Yanni Newman heading out of his role on the fourth line, and coming in, playing his first NHL game, is Oscar Fisker-Molgaard, coming up from the Coachella Valley Firebirds. And he doesn't play a lot in this game, but as we'll find out, he does end up making a difference in the time he does play. As we get into the first period, though, it's overall, during the stream, which if you joined for the stream, thank you very much. I'm glad to have done it again. But overall, I would say the first period was a pretty good one for the Kraken. The expected goals say that the Blackhawks had the slight edge in that first period, but personally, it just felt like the Kraken were a little bit more dangerous in the first period. I don't think they really, from whatever the expected goals models are going off of, got enough credit for some of the chances they did get. Matty Beniers in particular had a couple of very good looks and generated some others for his linemate. Jordan Eberle had a very, very good chance in tight with a puck that just turned over right onto his stick one-on-one with Knight. He just fired off a quick shot. Knight was positioned perfectly. Spencer Knight had a fantastic first period, and I think is really the only reason the Kraken didn't take that early lead. Which isn't to say that Decord didn't have a good first period at the other end of the ice. He did as well. I just think that some of the saves that Knight had to make were better, which is just pointing to, I think, the Kraken personally had some more dangerous chances than the Blackhawks. Either way, it was fairly back and forth, even first period, all things considered. The Blackhawks do get the first power play late in the first period, though the Kraken, shockingly, actually do a good job of killing it off. They hardly even let the Blackhawks across the blue line. In fact, I think the deepest the Blackhawks got into the Kraken end of the ice on that first power play they had was at the face-off that started the power play. So suddenly, out of nowhere, great first penalty kill of the game for the Kraken, and that would get us to that first intermission. And maybe that power play is really just what pushed the Blackhawks over, but even at that point, I think they still had the slight edge. Regardless, we get to the first intermission with the score still 0-0. So even if it was, I think, a fairly good first period for the Kraken, it still wasn't as good as their first period in the previous game in Detroit. But of course, we know how that second period started. The Kraken really lost that game in the first few minutes of the second period in Detroit. And boy, oh boy, did they try to lose in the first few minutes of the second period once again here in Chicago. It's less than a minute in. It's literally the first change for the Kraken, again with the benches farther away from your own end of the ice, where they end up giving up the goal. Well, not on the change itself, but on the play that results from the first Kraken line change. And it looks like a bad line change from the Kraken, and I think it could have been better. The Kraken just go for a full change behind a puck that gets barely across the blue line to Jordan Eberle. But honestly, it could have been a better line change, but I think it's made look a lot worse by Eberle just not getting the puck in deep enough. I think it was Beniers. It's either Beniers or Marchment, one of the other two forwards on that line, that gets the puck up through the neutral zone to Eberle, who's just standing kind of with one foot on either side, straddling the Chicago blue line right in front of the Kraken bench. And he's got a pretty easy job to do. Just get the puck, kind of stop it maybe a little bit, or just shove it down into Chicago's end. Make sure that it gets down below the goal line, maybe behind the net. Just make sure that that puck gets deep in so that your team has the time to get the change. Unfortunately, he all but swings and misses on the puck. He gets just a little bit of it, but hardly even enough to get it to the top of the face-off circle. So for the Blackhawk that's right there, it's easy enough for him to go collect and then turn around and fire it back in the neutral zone, which then with the Kraken expecting the puck to get in deep, they've gone for pretty much a full change. In fact, I think the only player that doesn't change is, well, maybe two. I think Adam Larsson and Matty Beniers are the only two that don't go for a change, and Beniers turns around and tries to get back as fast as he can as soon as he sees this turnover happen. Basically, as soon as he sees that Eberle doesn't get it in deep enough, Beniers reads the play well defensively and tries his best to get back. Unfortunately, it's just not enough. Larsson, who's the lone defenseman back at that point, is left with a 1-on-3, and the Blackhawks get two passes off. Beniers gets to the stick of Bertuzzi just in time, or almost just in time. He does kind of break up Bertuzzi's shot a little bit, but it ends up just forcing Bertuzzi's shot to flutter over Decord in a way that he wasn't predicting, and just under the bar to give the Blackhawks that early 1-0 lead. So, bad line change, just a not getting in deep enough. Who knows what's more to blame? Personally, I think the line change could have been maybe better, but really it just is made to look worse by Eberle not getting the puck in deep enough. Unfortunately, I think at that point when Eberle pushes the puck in, he just decides to go and change. He's like, ah, crap, I didn't get it that deep, but what, I will change and it'll be fine. I think he's just got to go and try and chase it down or block up the. As soon as you don't get it in that deep, you got to just try something. Try to at least prevent the player from collecting it and getting a clean pass off. If you're not going to get to it first, just you can't just leave the puck basically a few feet away from you and open the opportunity there for that response back the other way for the Blackhawks. Regardless, it's another collapse for the Kraken early in the second period, far from their bench, that leads to this early deficit. Now, I suppose to be fair, unlike the game in Detroit, they only give up the one early goal here in the second period as opposed to the two that they gave up early to the Red Wings, though there they had the 1-goal lead, so they still end up giving Detroit the 1-goal lead, and here they give Chicago the 1-goal lead early in the second, and they did nearly give Chicago a 2-goal lead as they allow, I think it was Bedard, to have a pretty clean look, not a breakaway, but he certainly got in pretty tight with an open shot on Decord. Fortunately for the second time in a game, as he had a similar look in the first period. Both times he misses the net, so that does help a lot when the leading point scorer in the NHL just misses the net with a pretty open, in-tight shot. The Kraken get a bit fortunate there. They're able to even things out a little bit until the Blackhawks start to really build some momentum again, getting towards the middle of the period. And while it doesn't immediately lead to a goal, it does lead to their second power play of the game. And even though things don't turn out well here, I will say that at least early on in this kill, the Kraken looked like they were picking up where they left off with the first kill in this game, just not allowing the Blackhawks across the blue line without a fight, really just not letting them across the blue line aside from a foot or two before clearing the puck again. Until eventually the Blackhawks get a breakaway chance, passing it just clean across the blue line, catching a guy in stride who just gets right through the Kraken defense of that blue line. Fortunately, Decord comes up with a big save there. The Kraken get it cleared again, but then the Blackhawks are able to enter, get another chance or two, and eventually it's actually, I think, just after an entry into the Kraken, and it's Bertuzzi who somehow beats Alexiak to this puck. It's a puck that gets down almost to the goal line down in the corner, and Alexiak, who is larger than Bertuzzi and definitely has a lot more reach with the much longer stick that he has, is somehow beat to the puck by Bertuzzi, who doesn't have positioning on Alexiak, was behind Alexiak trying to race for this puck, and still is able to get to it well enough to get it with some heat behind it and accuracy out to the far side across Decord's face, where crashing in is, I don't even remember who it was, Teravainen maybe. Regardless, crashing to the far side, it's another Blackhawk who beats another Kraken defender in, and he pretty much just slams it into the backside of the net with not that much Decord can do about it. It's on his tape and off again in a split second as Decord is trying to get back to that side. And maybe there was a chance here for Decord to make a pretty spectacular blocker save if he just commits to trying to make the save and lunging that arm out to the far side. Instead, with his blocker hand, which is also obviously holding the stick, he tries to break up the pass, takes a swipe at it as it's going across the top of the crease. Of course, he misses it, and then that makes it a lot harder for him then to get the blocker up into that far side, which is where the puck ends up going. Still, I'm not going to put this on Decord whatsoever. I think he's probably making the right play by trying to break up the pass. That's a much more sure thing than hoping that you throw your blocker to the right spot and get the save that way. Regardless, it's a power play goal for the Blackhawks, and just about halfway through the second, they have a 2-goal lead. A 2-goal lead, which the Kraken do respond to fairly quickly. They get a pretty good chance down at the Blackhawks end of the ice and then end up with a power play of their own that doesn't really go much of anywhere. They do spend some time in the offensive end. It's not as completely hopeless looking as the first Blackhawks power play, but even with all the time that they end up spending in the offensive end with the puck, it's a lot of just passing it around and slowly around the outside. Kind of what we've seen from Kraken power plays of years past, where they just aren't able to score because even when they do get set up, it's a lot of just slow passing around the outside, looking for a shooting lane that never shows up. And by the time they maybe decide to shoot the puck, it's blocked, or probably more likely a pass gets broken up at some point, or they flub a pass somehow and just never really get a chance. That's pretty much what we see here. It's a power play that really doesn't go much of anywhere for the Kraken, and they start to look a little bit better towards the end of the second, but I mean, it wasn't a high bar set by the start of the second. So the Kraken head into the third period with having done pretty much nothing offensively in the second. Now they're down 2 goals, and you're coming out of a second period where you had the one maybe decent chance, or maybe even bordering on good chance right after you gave up that second goal on the power play. But even that, I don't think they made Knight work nearly as hard or make nearly as good of a save as he did on multiple occasions in the first at any point in the second period. And depending on where you look at expected goals, they got anywhere from a fraction of one to basically nothing in that second period. And you've got 15 total shots on goal going into the third, which might sound like a decent amount for this year's Kraken, but is not very good. And you're down 2 against, so far to this point in the season, probably the best goaltender in the NHL. Now, that having been said, this is a Blackhawks team that does occasionally make mistakes, so they're probably going to get some opportunities. You just got to make sure, for one, you absolutely cannot afford to come out into the third period playing anywhere near the way that you played to start the second period of either of the last 2 games, but more relevant, the start of the second period of this one, or even aside from the long distance odd man chance, 3-on-1 chance that you allowed back the other way because of the failed dump in and then poorly timed change at the same time. Regardless of even that goal going in, just the general energy from the team was not there to start the second period. The attention to detail, similarly, just not there. You need to have that defensively. You cannot allow the Blackhawks to start getting chances again. And you also have to be disciplined in not taking more penalties because, well, your penalty kill, it might say that it's just under 70% on the kill, but boy, does it feel like a coin flip as soon as you go to the penalty kill as to whether or not you're going to give the opposing team a goal, and you're probably going to force your goaltender to make at least one good save. Fortunately for the Kraken, they come out into the third seeming like they are on a mission. It's still a bit of a slow, measured start, not generating anything offensively. It takes them a while to get their first shot on goal, and when that does come, it's going to come on a power play, their second of the game. And in a lot of ways, it's a pretty similar power play to the first power play the Kraken had in this game. It's a lot more of getting some offensive zone time, yeah, but a lot of passing it slowly around the outside, not finding anything as far as shooting lanes are concerned, really not even trying to work it towards the middle of the ice or getting net front presence, just nothing being generated, even though you do have the puck in their end, except for a little flurry of action that happens right around the middle of the power play. I can't remember if it was before or after they changed units. It doesn't really matter. They do get a couple of shots on goal, create a little bit of pressure, at least make Spencer Knight work a little bit. Honestly, maybe even more than he did over the entire second period combined. And while it doesn't get the Kraken on the board, this power play does not end up scoring where it kind of felt like you needed to get a power play goal here to get back in the game. It does at least start to tilt the ice a little bit towards Chicago's end, gets the Kraken rolling a bit, and fortunately they're able to maintain that momentum out of this power play, stay in the offensive end. And sure enough, it does actually end up leading to their first goal. It's Brandon Montour with a blast from way up by the blue line through traffic at the net, hits a couple things on the way in, and as the puck goes into the net, the Kraken come together, and it looks like it's going to be the first NHL goal for Oscar Fisker-Milgaard in his first NHL game. He goes to the bench first as Montour's shot through that traffic hits the moving screen of OFM, kind of right in the chest low logo area. Bounces off of him and ends up in the net behind Knight. Obviously for Knight, being able to deflect the puck on the way is going to make it a lot harder for a goaltender as hot as he is. Plus, the moving screen made it hard for him to see the shot in the first place. Unfortunately, though, but really not that unfortunate, it's just nice that the Kraken got the goal, and I don't think any of the players really care who ends up scoring as long as someone ends up scoring. But for the fun of seeing a guy score his first goal in his first NHL game, it turns out that he was not the last Kraken player to touch it. It is a double deflection on the way in, both off of body parts of Kraken rather than the sticks themselves, but it hits off of OFM's chest and then goes off of Cartier's leg. I don't think Cartier ever felt it. Kind of looks like it just hit his pants and then went in past Knight that way. Regardless, it turns out to be Cartier's goal, but OFM still gets his first point in his first NHL game, so he joins Beniers. Catton got his first point in his first game, and Newman got a goal in his first game. So he joins some other Kraken draft picks in getting their first NHL point in their first NHL game. And again, even though he spent less than 7 minutes on the ice, I think it was 650, he made a difference when he was out there. Not a lot of time, but that's how you earn more of it, is by doing good things, and certainly by making sure you don't do bad things, but also making a difference positively when you get those opportunities. He does here. He gets his first point, and the Kraken pull to within one. And thankfully, they were not done there as they continue to pressure the Blackhawks' end of the ice, with that goal being immediately followed by a pretty good shift from the Beniers line, and then an even better shift from the Stevenson line, getting offensive pressure, getting a couple more pretty good chances. And eventually, it's the Gaudreau line, which is, in this game, winged by both Catton and Wright, so you got three centers on the same line. Of course, Gaudreau certainly the best of the three at taking faceoff, so he was the one that got that center job. It was hard to tell at times who necessarily was filling more of the center role as they were moving around on the ice. Regardless, it's Wright who really starts this off as he gets deep into the offensive end with the puck, gets it, first of all, a pretty tenacious play to get it down behind the net before eventually losing it, but Catton, quick on it, follows Wright down behind the net, picks up the puck as Wright drops it, and then takes a kind of back up the other way up along the boards before passing it to kind of around the same spot that Montour fired off his shot. This time it's Riker Evans with a blast on the net, and it's into the back of it as Shane Wright had worked his way back around in front, once again providing a bit of a screen so Knight has to lean out to one side to look around Wright. The puck goes out to the other side. I'm sure Evans looking for which way Knight was going to look and fires it to the other side, or who knows, maybe he just picked a side and happened to get lucky that Knight was looking the other way. Regardless, Knight is able to get back to the side that the puck is shot at, but Wright, standing in front, is able to get just barely a little tiny piece of the puck as it passes by, getting some part of the blade of his stick on it. It's honestly, even in slow motion, hard to see how much of the puck he actually hits, but he gets enough of it that it touches his blade, deflects it just enough that it goes off the inside of the arm of the blocker of Knight and into the net instead of going off of the blocker and out. So with the play to set it up, the screen, and then just the tiniest bit of a deflection, Wright picks up his 5th of the season from Evans, and Catton, who also gets the assist. So the young guns, with OFM having gotten his first assist of his NHL career in his first game, now Catton getting a point, and of course Wright the goal. And, Riker Evans, also a Kraken draft pick from their first draft. It's good to see some of these young players for the Kraken really start to make a big difference, and a big moment tying the game here, still on the plus side of halfway through the third period. From there, the Kraken don't really keep the momentum going quite as much. They still get a couple more chances and really don't allow the Blackhawks to do much of anything offensively back the other way. It's a pretty measured, even game both ways. Really neither team wanting to make any big mistakes. I think both are, get the one, try and take advantage of an opportunity if it's there, but really just don't make any mistakes to allow the other team to take away the one potential point in the standing by getting to overtime. Eventually, though, the Kraken, pressing in the Chicago end of the ice, do look to make that one crucial mistake as Lindgren, who I think played a pretty fantastic game defensively for the Kraken, just doesn't quite get the puck. I can't remember exactly how it comes to him, but he bobbles the puck a little bit, tries to reach for it and lunge for it to push it deeper into the offensive end, but doesn't get enough of it. And then it's Bedard who ends up kind of picking it up and heading past him the other way. Lindgren is able to kind of keep stride with Bedard a little bit. I mean, he does have a bit of a head start, so Bedard is kind of pulling away from him, getting what looks like it could be a free breakaway for the most dangerous scorer, at least at this point, maybe in the entire NHL, but certainly for the Blackhawks. He's already missed 2 good opportunities this game, so you feel like a third one is destined to go in, especially at this point in the game. Fortunately, though, at the last possible second, Lindgren is able to wrap his stick on top of Bedard's stick, break up the shot. And I gotta say, I think Bedard has a bit of an argument here. Bedard not very happy as soon as the blocked shot or interrupted shot goes wide of the net, ends up harmlessly out to the side. Bedard, with his momentum, goes right down towards the ref and gives him an earful. You can tell he is pretty incensed by the non-call of what I think could have easily been called a slash or maybe even a hook on Lindgren. Instead, there's no call, and honestly, as dumb as it might sound, at any other point in the game, I think this is certainly a penalty on Lindgren. Not that it shouldn't be a penalty here as well, but that's just NHL officiating for you. We know, or anybody that has watched enough NHL hockey over, I would say, the last few years, but really any NHL hockey ever, you know that officials swallow their whistles quite a bit. near the end of a tight game. I mean, they'll still call something if it's completely blatantly obvious, which I think Blackhawks fans might argue that this was blatantly obvious and maybe was worthy of a call even there. But we know that officials are much, much less likely to call anything that could send a team to a power play that could decide the game late, like this one. So, for whatever reason, that's probably a big part of it. The call isn't made. Bedard, incredibly unhappy to say the very least, goes and gives the ref a mouthful. You can tell the ref is willing to accept it. He's willing to let Bedard kind of blow his lid a little bit, get out a little bit of frustration, but as long as he skates away from it and lets that kind of burst of frustration out and lets that be, fine, so be it. Fortunately for the Kraken, though, unfortunately for the Blackhawks, Bedard does not let it be after his first little outburst at the official. He turns back 2 or 3 times to look over his shoulder and yell more, I would imagine, not terribly family-friendly words at the official on his way to the bench. And it's either the second or third time that he turns around that the official's arm goes up in the air. As soon as the Blackhawks touch the puck, it's Bedard to the box for an unsportsmanlike conduct minor that sends the Kraken to the power play. Which, I gotta say, this does feel like a little bit of ref's ego getting the better of the way that they typically call things towards the end of the game. I know. Bold take there. Bold take to say that an official of a professional sporting event would allow their ego to affect that professional sporting event in some way. We would certainly never see that in an NHL or otherwise game anywhere across any of the major sports leagues, really across the world, but yeah, in North America either. I mean, at least to be somewhat fair to NHL officials, I think whatever Bedard said to him just the first time around would probably have gotten him a penalty in the NFL right away and would have gotten him tossed for sure if he said that to an ump in baseball. NHL officials are willing to take a little bit more verbal abuse. They're a little bit more tough-skinned than some other officials of other leagues. Still, to not call what was certainly a penalty most of the time on Lindgren, and then to decide, you know what, maybe I don't care that much about sending a team to a power play late in a tied game. As soon as you just get some bad words thrown your way for not making that call, it does seem it's a little ego, a little bit soft. Regardless, for the Kraken, they'll happily take the power play. And this time, well, the second power play warmed things up after a not-so-great first power play. And the third one, well, the Blackhawks never got their third chance on the power play. They didn't need it to score. The Kraken, third time is the charm for them on the power play, as it does take just about the entire power play to make something happen. They got a couple of chances here and there, but it looks like they're going to come up empty once again. Until finally, in the waning seconds of the power play, as Bedard is up and ready to get released back out onto the ice, it's Montour circling down below the face-off dot before firing a shot to the far side. Well, not really a shot pass. It's not going on net. It's going just above the far side of the net, where waiting on that far side is Jaden Schwartz with his stick on the ice. It goes between the legs of the last back Hawks defenseman or penalty killer, and Schwartz slams it not into the back door of the net. That's actually held off pretty well by Spencer Knight. He was able to get his toe quickly to that back post. Instead, though, Schwartz ends up putting it through the 5-hole of Knight as his legs come apart, the pads come apart to get that toe to the far post. Schwartz puts it 5-hole. The Kraken, with the power play goal, take the 3-2 lead with just over 2 minutes left in the game. Well, to be exact, it's 2 minutes and 18 seconds that remain after Schwartz picks up his tied for the now team leading 8th goal of the season. And it doesn't take the Blackhawks terribly long to get the puck into the Kraken end, pull Knight right away. But as they dump the puck in, Knight gets pulled to Cord with the puck behind the net, winds up and fires it down the ice right away. But all over that is, I don't know who 55 for the Blackhawks is, but he palms it down right around the blue line of the Blackhawks and turns it back the other way. The Kraken actually would get it back turned down to the other end of the ice and then keep the Blackhawks from pulling Knight for a second time for quite a while. Eventually they do get Knight pulled with just over a minute left. Fortunately, they only really get the one good chance on net. It's another chance from Bedard that Decord's able to save, but it bounces out to spacing on who, I think it was Green that got the rebound shot off. Fortunately, Decord is able to come up with that rebound shot. and that would be the best chance the Blackhawks would have, is eventually the Kraken would get one more clear. Eberle chasing down Bedard doesn't allow him to get it back headed the other way in time, and the Kraken, with the last second ticking off, get their 10th win of the season, winning this one 3-2 again in regulation. And while sure being this excited, or really excited at all, about beating the Blackhawks the way the Kraken do here, having to score 3 goals to barely sneak it out in regulation at the end after playing a terrible second period would feel somewhat ridiculous at this time last season. Again, this is a Blackhawks team that has been pretty good. I mean, if you came into the season not knowing anything that had happened over the last few years, you'd look at this Blackhawks team and say, yeah, that's a pretty good team. I mean, sure, they're no world beaters, but they came into the game with, was it 24 points in 21 games? They were a point ahead of the Kraken. They had 10 wins on the season. And now the Kraken have come in and beat them twice. And not just beat them twice, but 2 of their 6 now regulation losses in their first 20 games have been to the Kraken. So, hey, maybe they're 2 points that you probably wrote down as 2 points the Kraken were going to get at the start of the season, but they sure earned them against a team that is not playing like a pushover, and they earned them in a pretty exciting way. I mean, sure, it would be nice if the Kraken actually showed up to start a second period for once on this road trip. It's been 2 games and 2 horrendous starts to the second period. Fortunately, that doesn't have to be the story of the road trip, at least not right now anyway, because they were able to have that multi-goal third period comeback to get this win, get these 2 points in the standings, especially with this being a road trip, that coming into it with the teams on the schedule, and I mean, they were all teams that are playing pretty well. Detroit had started to cool off a little bit, but they've been off to a good start to their season, and we saw that that was not an easy game. The Kraken let up for a few minutes, and Detroit took advantage. Chicago here, same thing. Maybe not a team you would have thought much of coming into the season, but we've talked about how they're off to a pretty good start. You're going to get Pittsburgh, who's cooled off, but they got off to a great start to their season. And then kind of the flip of that is an Islanders team to end the road trip on Sunday, who got off to a pretty terrible start, but have been one of the best teams in the NHL since then. You're going to get them kind of at their best as well. It's still a stretch of games, though, when you're coming back for Dallas and Edmonton, even if especially Edmonton has had a struggling start to the season. Those are very good and very talented teams. This is a road trip where it kind of felt like the Kraken, to keep pace, needed at least 5 to maybe 6 points in the standing. I would say at least 5 would have felt pretty good coming out of this road trip. And going into the third, it looked like they might just, I mean, that might be out of the realm of possibility right away here in the first 2 games, but they made it happen, got these 2 points, and now go into a weekend back-to-back where, well, hopefully it goes better than back-to-backs have in the past, especially the second half of it against the Islanders. But we'll see in time. Grubauer will obviously get one of those starts. I wouldn't be surprised to see Grubauer get the next start and then Decord against the Islanders, but who knows? Who knows what the Kraken do as far as handling Pittsburgh and the Islanders. Until then, though, at least the Kraken come off of once again proving to themselves that they are always in a game. They did not quit on this one. Even after a pretty poor second period, they acknowledged it, went into the locker room, figured something out, came out, and just turned the game right around pretty much from the start of that third period. Now, of course, there are still plenty of things that could be going better for the Kraken. They certainly could be scoring more. We know that. They definitely need to be better on the penalty kill. And even the power play, while it keeps finding ways to score, it's kind of similar to the team in that it feels like it's just being opportunistic rather than actually good when it comes to the scoring. They're finding ways to do it, but they're all kind of greasy. I mean, look, a goal's a goal, but it just doesn't feel like something that they can continue to do, especially once the schedule does get harder as the season goes along, or at least it seems like it's going to get harder as the season goes along, playing a lot more teams that were in the playoffs last season the deeper we get into this season. Of course, a lot of the teams that were in the playoffs last season are not in those positions right now, so we'll see how it all plays out. But at least for now, getting McCann back is going to be pretty big, really, for both of those things, scoring and the penalty kill. But something's got to get figured out in those 2 places. For now, though, it's just good for the Kraken that even with McCann out, and even when they had Decord out, even with the injuries that they've dealt with, they're still sitting in a top 3 spot in the Pacific. With all that having been said, let's close this one out with the Kraken 3 stars. Originally, I thought this was going to be a pretty short R&R. And to say originally, coming out of the second period, I thought this was going to be a pretty short R&R. It would just be like, oh yeah, they looked like they did in Detroit. They had a decent first, were terrible to start the second period, lost the game there, and then never showed life again. But they showed life in that third period. So here we are with actually 3 Kraken stars, as always, brought to you by the patrons over on Patreon. In this particular case, brought to you by Chris over on Patreon, who was also there with hanging out during the live stream. So thank you for that. With the 3 stars in this one, I'm not going to argue with what Chris has here. He has Maddie, Decord, and Schwartz. As far as the order there, I don't think I'm going to argue with the order either. I think I'm going to go with Maddie as the first star. He doesn't get on the scoring sheet. I think he has his point streak broken up, but he still was, in my mind, the best skater on the ice for the Kraken in this game. The fact that he didn't score in this game is just a testament to how good Spencer Knight has been. And I mean, again, the Kraken, 2 of their goals, their 2 5-on-5 goals are double deflections. One of them is a double deflection off 2 Kraken players. The other one deflects off Wright and then off of Knight in goal. So yeah, as far as the actual dangerous looks, as far as individual offense, I think Beniers produced as much individual offense as anybody else, and also was an absolute beast in the defensive end. He had one shift in particular, which this shift does end up leading to the power play that the Blackhawks end up scoring on. We can get to that, but Beniers had a defensive shift in the second period where he loses his stick pretty early on. It must have broken. It was kind of sitting out there, and he had some opportunities to pick it up, so it must have broken, just wasn't obvious. But he's skating around without a stick. The Blackhawks they hem the Kraken into their end again in the second period, so far away from the bench, you can't just try and get to the bench quickly to grab a new stick. It seemed like they had darn near 2 minutes. It's probably more like 1, maybe a minute and a half, keeping the Kraken in their end where Beniers doesn't have a stick. So you're kind of a pseudo power play, kind of 5 versus 4.5 with Beniers still there, though Beniers really made himself relevant in this play. Even without a stick, he blocked 2 shots, and 2 pretty hard shots that he just took to the legs. He also had another pass breakup that was from below the goal line going out front into the slot, that if that pass gets through, I think it easily could have ended up in the back of the net. So good breakup there. And then he does finish it with, after his second or third big block of that shift without the stick in open ice, he kind of goes to the ice to try and get the puck and whiffs at it as he tries to hit it out of the end with his glove. Instead, as he's kind of flailing at it trying to hit it, ends up accidentally passing it backwards to Bedard behind him, and then Bedard quickly passes it up to Bertuzzi, who's been left alone by the rest of the Kraken defense out in front of Decord. 1-on-1, Decord goes for the poke check and ends up poking the skates out from under Bertuzzi, so Decord takes a tripping call. It was Marchman that ended up serving the penalty. Regardless of how it ended, and Matty almost getting kind of a secondary assist, passing it to Bedard on accident as he's trying to kind of furiously clear it with his glove after being hemmed in for that long. Regardless of how it ended, Beniers a monster defensive shift there, and that wasn't a one-off. I mean, it was a one-off as far as defending without the stick, but he was fantastic defensively, and also he's going to start scoring at some point. The way that he's playing, it just hasn't quite been there yet. He did have a few opportunities that he wound up and just whiffed on or didn't get all of, so that's still there. He's kind of figured out how to be a little bit more accurate with the shots and actually, maybe watching the puck a little bit better as he's shooting it rather than looking where he's shooting, but who knows? I'm not an expert there. Still, it's going to start coming for him the way he's playing. Anyway, moving on with the second star, I will go Decord. I think he had a pretty strong game. The 2 goals that go in past him, I can't blame either one on him. One's a 3-on-1 chance with the shot getting even partially deflected. And then the second goal is a power play goal where his penalty kill, again, just collapsed on itself in the back minute of the penalty kill. So yeah, not much of a chance for Decord on either one of those. But other than that, he was pretty perfect in net for the Kraken. And then the third star, Schwartz, gets the game-winning goal. Had some good shifts here and there as well, but the game-winning goal is a big one there on the power play. And there's plenty of other guys, obviously OFM getting his first point and playing well in the 6 minutes that he played. Catton, I thought, had another strong game. Wright had a good third period. Wright had a pretty tough first 2 periods, but he'd have a good third period. I think Lindgren is certainly worth mentioning. I think Lindgren had a fantastic game defensively, didn't offer a ton in the offensive end, and did with the last defensive play that probably should have been a penalty. He actually had two times in this game where he probably should have been penalized, but he played well defensively, and look, it didn't turn into a penalty, so it is what it is. He did have to make up for his own mistake with that one at the end. Still, I think he played very well defensively. The other one, by the way, that I think probably should have been a penalty on Lindgren was during the first Blackhawks power play at the end of the first period. He goes for a hit to try and separate Burakovsky from the puck. That I think it was just unfortunate circumstance that he leans in with his shoulder for the hit as Burakovsky kind of leans his head in to try and get a pass off, but he makes solid contact a pretty solid second after the puck was off away from Burakovsky. Burakovsky gets rid of the puck, and then I think at least a second later, it's Lindgren's shoulder to Berkey's head, and Berkey would end up going to the ice pretty hard and then leaving down the tunnel and not returning. So hopefully Burakovsky's okay and that doesn't turn into something bigger like we saw happen with him in Seattle a couple of times. I'd really hate for that to happen. I think it could have easily been called roughing. Probably should have been called a roughing or a hit to the head. It could have easily been called interference, I think. So the Kraken there, Lindgren, I think getting away with one because, again, the refs tend to swallow their whistles quite a bit when a team's already on the power play. They really don't like giving a team a two-man advantage, especially for what would have been most of that power play. So Lindgren got away with a couple, but otherwise had a pretty fantastic game, so I think he would be worth mentioning. Dunn, I thought, played pretty good in this game. Doesn't end up getting on the score sheet, but had a good defensive game and was affecting things offensively as far as pressure is concerned for the Kraken in the third period. Plenty of players to mention, so let me know down in the comment section who your 3 stars would be. If you disagree with any of the 3, throw in a new one. Love to know what you think. And until next time, for another weekend back-to-back, stay safe out there, be good to each other. God bless, and go Kraken.